turn our attention now to our conversations on CARICOM. Of course, as you know, we always have Barbados Ambassador to CARICOM, His Excellency David Comissiong, who enlightens us on a lot of things CARICOM related. Sometimes we drift on by him and we don't pay enough attention. But when he sits with us, boy, does he capture our attention. And so that's where we start this morning. Good morning to you, Ambassador.
Morning, Pearson.
This has been, in the last couple of weeks in particular, quite a moment in CARICOM as we had a couple of elections. And in one instance, we saw a change. In the other instance, we saw a reaffirmation. And let's talk a little bit about what you saw in the recent elections in St Vincent and St Lucia.
Well, you know, the people spoke in both cases. From a CARICOM perspective, in the St Vincent election, CARICOM lost a real resource. You know, Prime Minister Ralph Gonsalves was widely regarded as the elder statesman of CARICOM, and I can tell you that quite often in the councils of CARICOM, when there's a difficult problem to deal with, after everybody else has spoken, they would turn to Prime Minister Gonsalves. And let's now hear the elder statesman. So from that, having lost him, we will feel it. But congratulations to the new Democratic Party, who were in the wilderness for close to 25 years, and are now in government. St Lucia, you know, many people thought that. Because many people thought that the election in St Vincent was a sign of what might come in St Lucia, because of course the New Democratic Party is one of the center-right parties, the yellow party. And similarly in Trinidad and Tobago, you had the UNC, the United National Congress, also a center-right party, yellow color, and some people thought, well, maybe this is a wave of center-right parties coming against the traditional Labour parties that are associated with the color red. But it was not to be, because the St Lucia Labour Party did magnificently well last night, winning, well, you said 14 seats, but in reality, really 16 seats.
Because the two independents are aligned with the Labour Party.
Yes, they're really in everything except name members of the St Lucia Labour Party. But just to kind of put things in perspective, to create a kind of frame of reference, the tag Labour Party is a meaningful tag. The Labour Party tends to be the political party that emerged organically out of the people's struggles of the 1930s, 40s, and 50s. And they all tend to have a center-left philosophy of social democracy, and all that goes with social democracy, some stance, anti-imperialist stance, and so forth. So if you look at the configuration of governing parties in CARICOM, I mean, whether it's Barbados, the Barbados Labour Party,
St Kitts, the St Kitts
Labour Party, Antigua, the Antigua Labour Party, then even go to Belize, the People's United Party, which is the original Labour Party of Belize that emerged out of the people's struggles in those. Bahamas, the Progressive Liberal Party, which is really the Labour Party of the Bahamas. So if you want to kind of break down Caribbean political parties, a convenient way of looking at it is the initial parties that emerged out of the popular struggles all tended to be Labour parties, centre-left, social democracy, kind of laborism, you know, social rights for the people. But then the parties that came after them, I guess maybe because that Labour political space, social democracy political space had already been filled, the parties that tended to come after them tended to be more center-right parties. So we are seeing that little tug of war being played out. But whoever wins an election, truth be told, once we get to CARICOM, CARICOM is a club. So so those ideological labels tend to be kind of put aside. Once you get into the club, then we try as much as possible, to function as a club. And yes, sometimes there are strains in the club along ideological lines, but we try to keep those to a minimum. And because CARICOM can only be efficient and successful if there's unity.
Yes. But there are workers' parties as well. You talk about Labour parties, but there are also workers' parties in the Caribbean. Dominica, St. Lucia itself also had workers' parties. Do they not also have the same positioning, centre-left?
No. Well, I mean, the United Workers' Party, we would classify them on an ideological spectrum. We would say centre-right.
Okay.
So the St. Lucia Labour Party would be centre-left. The United Workers' Party, center-right. I mean, in the Caribbean, especially the Caribbean community, there's a basic consensus. We are not like Latin America that veers from the Socialist Party to some far-right party. No. So we don't really have far-right parties. So our pendulum tends to be a much more narrow swing than in most other parts of the world. In other parts of the world, you get these exaggerated swings from socialists or communists even to far-right, oligarchical, even fascist parties. Thank God, we don't suffer from that. So even though, we do have differences in ideological orientation, but they are not extreme. They're not extreme.
Poles apart.
So that's why we say center left and center right. So there is that middle area of convergence.
All right. I mean, watching some other movements happening, because I see Grenada is also becoming quite active politically. I suppose they're gearing up for their general elections as well. And so there's a lot happening in CARICOM. And you're right, because people thought the yellow code was a wave, but it was stopped in St. Lucia. And so we watch with bated breath what else happens in politics across the Caribbean. But with the change in who leads, we have Trinidad, and now we have a new leader of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. When is the next meeting, first of all, and what do you think they will bring to that same club of which you spoke?
Well, the next major gathering will be in February in St. Kitts. St. Kitts will take over the chairmanship of CARICOM at the beginning of the next year. The change in Trinidad, as we all can see, has brought strains, particularly in relation to that long, well-established CARICOM position of the Caribbean being a zone of peace. And I mean, that was very surprising, I guess, to everybody across CARICOM, because we all thought that this was such a cornerstone principle of CARICOM that we couldn't imagine that we would have a CARICOM state, disavowing that fundamental plank of our coordinated collective foreign policy. So we do see that elections have consequences, and we have to deal with the consequences. We have to wait and see what positions are taken by the new government in St. Vincent, the new Democratic Party. So I don't want to anticipate, prejudge. So I guess we'll just have to wait and see. But I trust that they will adhere. And I'm stressing this thing about zone of peace, because one of the biggest problems we are facing now is that resurgence of the Monroe Doctrine, that resurgence of a seeming desire to effectively dominate our region. I don't even want to use the dreaded word recolonization, but we are facing a very serious challenge. I mean, for the first time virtually in centuries, we are facing the real prospect of war in the Caribbean. So that is something that we have to take very, very seriously. Who would have thought that we would ever be here discussing the possibility of war? Yeah, I mean big power war. I don't mean like a little invasion of Grenada in 1983, as tragic as that was. But what is on our doorsteps is something much, much larger and destructive than that. Who would have thought, right? So this is a very serious threat, and that is why that notion of our region being a zone of peace, it is so critical that we all support that and defend that and advocate for that, because nobody wins in a war.
You're quoting a song, nobody wins a war.
Wins a war.
But the military might, and one must have consequential military mights as well. The assets within the Caribbean, are they sufficient from where you sit to advocate the same zone of peace, or to at least have a defense from that attack?
Well, we will never be able to defend ourselves militarily. I mean, we are small states, but this is why principle matters so much. This is why international law matters so much. This is why multilateralism, United Nations, matters so much, and that is where we get our safety. That's where we get our security. So any threat that is threatening to subvert international law, these fundamental principles of sovereignty, respect for national sovereignty, respect for the territorial integrity of states, non-intervention, peaceful settlement of disputes, these are all fundamental planks of international law reflected in the Charter of the United Nations. So big powers can afford just to cast that aside. We can't afford. So we always have to be advocating for respect for international law. We cannot encourage a world of might makes right, because we are grappling with it, but our position always has to be to stand against it and to insist that international law and the multilateral processes must be respected. We will not always be successful, but we of all people have to try to hold the line, because if that line is not maintained in some fashion, it may not be perfect, but if it is not maintained in some fashion, then the small, relatively powerless states, we are the ones that are really going to suffer.
A lot of times we tend to think that line is the defense led by the leaders. I'm looking at the people now, because sometimes you hear the voices being raised in public, either on call-in programs or otherwise, where there seems to be a weakening of the people's position on this.
Yeah, and it's so critical that it be the people, because our leaders can only be as strong as the people who are behind them and supporting them. And this is, this is where our strength comes from. Small nations, the only strength we can have is the strength of unity. So whether it is the governments being unified, the political leadership being unified, but equally as important, perhaps more important, the people being unified. So if in our region we could have a situation where governments and people know what our fundamental values and principles are, what our fundamental worldview is, and we stand behind it as a solid block, then we can have real strength. Unity is strength, But once we have those divisions, we are not clear about our fundamental values, we are not clear about where we stand in, sometimes a very confusing world situation, and we get divided, then we are lost, because we will not have strength. So unity, clarity of understanding, and this is why I do this program every week, Pearson. We have to communicate with our people, right? We have to share ideas, we have to share knowledge, because as much as possible we should try to go forward as a unified whole.
So within all that's happening in CARICOM, a lot's are happening in individual states as well, and in particular Barbados. Just over the last weekend, we would have marked 59 years of independence and 4 years as a republic. But we don't do this alone. But there's so many milestones that sometimes, as I said at the beginning, we miss because time doesn't allow us to mark the time in the way that it needs to be marked. And so, Ambassador Comissiong, I know I saw recently in one of our publications, you shared with us some of the things, lest we forget, that we've achieved.
Yeah, yes, I find that sometimes the public discourse in Barbados is so negative, and we are so hard on ourselves, and sometimes we overlook so many achievements. So I thought I put a lot of faith and confidence in the Republic. We launched this Republic 4 years ago, and I think, and this is, the Republic is so important because this is when we totally took our national sovereignty into our own hands. No more British monarchy being our head of state. We will take upon ourselves the power to do everything to govern ourselves. And we have been doing so for the last 4 years. So I think it's important that every year of the Republic that we look at the achievements of that year. So I came up with my own, this is my own personal selection of what I think are the 12 most outstanding achievements, one for each month of the year. So I'm going from November 2024 to November 2025. And, you know, I was thinking of it as achievements of the Republic, but, you know, this is Christmas.
Yes.
Blood just inspired me. Really and truly, this could be considered our own Christmas gift to ourselves. The achievements that we accomplished as a nation, as a republic. And so this is just my list, but I would begin, and you can help me count them off.
Sure.
Number one, we reduced unemployment to a historic low of 6.1%. We accomplished 17 successive quarters of economic growth. That is well over 4 years of uninterrupted economic growth. And backing up all of that, our Ministry of Labor established a national jobs registry. So I looked at those collectively and said that is the number one national achievement. And then I said, agriculture. We are doing some fantastic things in agriculture. This past year, the government constructed the Barbados Institute of Food and Agriculture in your parish, the Hope,
Yes.
in St. Lucie.
Yes.
And simultaneous to that, the University of the West Indies constructed their agricultural research park in St. Thomas, at Duke's in St. Thomas. And complementing both of those developments, we have established a tissue culture lab in Barbados. This is where we're going to be able to use the highest technology to give our farmers the best planting material. So what we're seeing in Barbados is a transition to a more science-driven approach to agriculture.
And a more sustainable approach as well, being able to feed oneself.
Yes, well, that's so important, you know. CARICOM, this is all part, really. This really fits into the CARICOM 25 by 25, but we are now calling it 25 by 25 plus 5.
Yes.
You know, our effort to do more produce more of our food, more food security. Then there was something that Barbados did that really blew the minds of the world. We led in the creation of the Visionary Debt for Climate Resilience Swap. This is where we put in place a very complicated financial arrangement, but the end result of it was that $125 million of our foreign debt, instead of us paying out this money to creditors and banks, we were able to transform that into capital that will upgrade our sewage plant, and that will produce more water resources for our country. So this is very visionary, and this is very important, Pearson. A lot of people don't understand it. What this is saying to the world, look, you all set up all these financial institutions at the end of World War II. they were not meant for us, the developing countries. You set them up for your own purposes. But what we are saying to you, and they have not really served us well because they weren't designed for us, but we are saying that with the right will and determination, if we are willing to think and act outside the box, we can still get these institutions to effectively help us solve our real developmental problems. And so all of the developing world, we have this big problem with these big national debts. This is showing that we can find a way to repurpose those debts. And instead of those debts being a millstone around our neck, we could turn them into something developmental. So kudos to Barbados in leading the way. The social sector. All of us are witnessing that wonderful state-of-the-art geriatric hospital being constructed at Waterford, right by the Botanical Gardens. And so I think that that's a great achievement. But along with that, this year, paid paternity leave for fathers, right? Something that gives me goosebumps, that in Barbados, how the new Disabilities Rights Act, the way that we are responding to our citizens who suffer from disabilities, you know, the new monthly social security benefits that they will be receiving. So it makes me very proud as a Barbadian. The electric buses.
Yes.
You know, we all saw that wonderful sight back in, I think, around about April of this year. Those 30 new electric buses. What people are calling the spaceship at Newton, but that's not a spaceship. That is a life sciences park that Barbados is developing. That is where we are going to enter a new high technology phase of our economy. Manufacturing medications, vaccines, getting involved in biotechnology products. The African Export-Import Bank. You know, they're going to be building that $380 million trade center and headquarters. That is going to open up a whole world of international trade for us. CARIFESTA, and all that went with CARIFESTA. Not just the hosting of CARIFESTA, but we use CARIFESTA to fast track the construction of the Richard Stout Amphitheater, the National Performing Arts Center in Newton. We now have the magnificent CARIFESTA House. And close by, another development, another thing we could be very proud about, we are developing that Pan-African Slavery Memorial at Newton. We are digitizing our slavery records. We are creating a new heritage district and industry. We also, Pearson, the new high-tech cancer fighting equipment at the QEH. Yes. We have started upon a new $300 million expansion of the QEH, and full free movement. We have initiated, we are leading the way in CARICOM, along with St Vincent, Dominica, and Belize, the full free movement. And the final one, I would say, is our foreign policy. We have stayed true to our fundamental philosophy of friends of all, satellites of none. We did that. We recognized the state of Palestine. We have defended the principle of the Caribbean being a zone of peace. And so it is very important that we are very clear on our foreign policy. Errol Barrow gave us that motto in 1966, friends of all, satellites of none, and it has guided us well. And kudos to the Republic. We are living up to that foreign policy motto.
And in the midst of all of these achievements, people, what it means to people at the end of it all. And that's why I want to emphasize this. I come back to it again, because oftentimes we forget it was driven by people.
Yes, well, you know, when you look through all of those things I have mentioned, Barbados is holding fast to that social democracy political philosophy, which says that the center of everything is people. The people must be educated, people must be fed, people must be clothed, people must be housed, people must have access to education, to health care, to nurture. And we must always insist upon that, because that is who we are. We, after all, we were the world's first slave society. Virtually all of us came across that, our ancestors came across that middle passage in the bottom of the hold of a slave ship. We all come from, we are all from the people from down below. And we lived in a society that sought to dehumanize us, that sought to even strip us of our humanity. And for centuries, our ancestors, we had to fight to insist, no, we are human beings deserving of respect and deserving of all the social rights. So that has been the driving force of our history. And we must stay true to it, that fundamental social democracy concept. As small nations, that fundamental anti-imperialist attitude reflected in the motto of Friends of All, Satellites of None, and of course, that commitment to regional unity and our brothers and sisters. So I would say, Pearson, if I were a principal grading the Republic, I would give the Republic an A+. I think the Republic is doing well in a very difficult international environment. I think the Republic is holding its own, and I think Barbados has a very, very important role to play in Caribbean affairs and even in broader international affairs.
The Prime Minister, in her independence address, also reminded us that the goal is to become a world-class society by 2030. And there's much, though we've achieved, there's still a lot more to be achieved, and not to grow weary in achieving as well. And so, you know, in that positioning, the question always is, but how now do I leap from today to then?
And to be fair, she also reminded us of some of the things that we are not doing well. The crime situation, for example. She reminded us of the many challenges that our people face, you know, with high costs of living. Of course, being a small, open economy, we are what they call price takers rather than price makers. You know, a lot of the inflation is imported, and we just, because, you know, we don't make a lot of these products, we depend on a lot of imports. So she was very realistic as well. While we herald our achievements, and I guess it's incumbent on me as well, you know, to acknowledge that there's still some areas that we have to really attend to and do better at. But yes, we are on our way to being. But we must be world class in our own way, you know.
That's
right. We must not.
That's what it's heading to.
We will never be one of these, you know, this big skyscrapers and massive industries, because that's not. We are small is beautiful. Small is beautiful. So we must be world class in terms of the quality of our people, their cultural level, their artistic, their educational advancement, their social philosophy, their civilization, their civilized behavior. So we must, you know, I don't like this word human capital too much, but our world class must be world class in terms of human development. When people look at the citizens of Barbados, people from outside, you know, they must be taken aback. Wow, these people are something else. These people are really, you know, elevated, noble, well cultivated, and civilized human beings. So I think that is what we must aim at, you know, and the Prime Minister expressed it last year. She expressed it in terms of beacons of renewal for Barbados, and she outlined about 5 beacons, you know, of accountability, empathy, but she ended with the 5th one, to produce world-class citizens rooted in their Barbadian culture, heritage, and identity. And that's a wonderful way of putting it. Yes, we must be world class. We must be capable of the highest international standards, but at all times rooted in that Barbadian heritage and identity and culture.
And to answer my how, educational transformation, and that's another discussion for another time. But Ambassador, it's been, again, outstanding sitting with you to hear not just what's happening in CARICOM alone, but how do we juxtapose what's happening in Barbados with reaching and helping our CARICOM neighbors as well to achieve, because we don't want to do this alone. We're bringing our brothers and sisters along.
We can't do it alone, you know. CARICOM is our fundamental frame of reference. We have to do things as a Caribbean community, a Caribbean family.
Exclamation mark. And so on that, we say thank you again for joining us, Ambassador David
My
Comissiong, Barbados Ambassador to CARICOM. That's our conversations on CARICOM.
Morning, morning, morning. Good morning. Good morning to you.